Estamos capacitados para servir por un liderazgo impulsado por laicos que conecta a los laicos y empresarios de la División Interamericana para compartir a Cristo en el mercado. Estamos capacitados para servir.
We are empowered to serve by lay-driven leadership, connecting the Inter-American Division laymen and business people to share Christ in the marketplace. We are empowered to serve.
Good morning, brethren. We start everything with prayer. So pray with me, if you will. Not I, but Christ, be honored, loved, exalted. Not I, but Christ, be seen, be known, be heard. Not I, but Christ in every look and action. Not I, but Christ in every thought and word. Not I, but Christ, my every need supplying. Not I, but Christ, my strength and health to be. Christ, only Christ, for body, soul, and spirit. Christ, only Christ, here and eternally. Amen. Let me make two quick confessions. One, I'm the son of a school principal and a pastor. So if I teach a little bit and I preach a little bit, I trust that's all right. The second is I'm a native of Trinidad. So if you find me speaking quickly and you need me to slow down, just let me know. As part of my introduction, which evidently I didn't write, I have served for almost 4 decades. I've been privileged to, as a business leader in multiple industries, organizations across the world. I've collaborated with some of the most noteworthy and I suspect at times infamous entrepreneurs and executives. I've worked closely with their diligent or delinquent employees. Despite the contrasting social and cultural norms, I've found that the single greatest commonality among all people is the need to tap into and harness the power and promise within themselves. A core belief of mine is that leaders make leaders, not followers. And so, even as I've worked my way up the ranks, I always felt called and compelled to share my insights and learnings with others. That has been the fundamental backdrop to my personal and more so professional relationships. Now, within the context of today's discourse, networking, and for those of you who like gadgets, I suggest you prepare to take notes on them, or if you have pen and paper, feel free to take notes with that medium. Yeah? So, in terms of the discourse today, networking is about, well, creating a network of contacts who can provide you with advice, opportunities, information relevant to our professional interests. At a high level, it's about cultivating, getting to know people, understanding their interests, finding common ground with them, but more importantly, understanding their why. A well-rounded network would include people from diverse backgrounds so that you have a more in-depth and broader range of perspectives. It also means sharing, mainly knowledge and resources, yes, but networking isn't just about what's in it for you. It's about the value you can provide. It's about reciprocity. Why? Because all non-reciprocal relationships die. We love Christ because he first loved us. It's about expanding, leveraging your existing network to gain access to career opportunities, partnerships, industry insights more readily than you could through conventional channels. It means maintaining, going beyond your initial engagement, following up, following through, and nurturing the relationships over time, again, by actively contributing value. It's also about communicating politely, forthrightly, and listening actively. Last and by no means least, it's about trust and credibility, being reliable, being respectful, and being genuine in your interactions. So effective networking is strategic, yes, but what underpins it is something I'm deeply passionate about. It's called the purpose. So it must be about clear goals, objectives, being intentional, but I'd like to build out briefly for you a foundation of purpose because truth be told, the greatest tragedy is not death, it's a life lived without purpose. As a mentor and coach, I'd often ask my mentees this question: what type of life do you think you deserve? Is it a life of ease and excitement, leisure and luxury, peace and prosperity, or do you see yourself buried beneath the weight of work and worry? In collating their answers, I'd often point out to them that we don't get the life we deserve, we get the life we decide on. The course and quality of our lives is going to be dictated by the quality of our choices. The quality of our choices will be dictated by what we believe, and what we believe, well, that's going to be dictated by who we choose to believe. So whoever has our air has our future. I don't know if you're familiar with this statement. You are not what you think you are, but what you think about, that's what you are. And sure, what contributes to that is hereditary and environment, but more importantly, it's fueled by choice. So it's not so much about how you start or what you start with. It's more about the decisions you make, the little ones and the not so little ones, that build your character, and your character determines how you finish. I've heard people speak about chance, coincidence, and happenstance. Of course, there's no such thing. Your iPhone, for those of you who have one, had everything it needed to be an iPhone programmed into it at its creation. Likewise, everything that we need to fulfill our purpose was imbued in us at our creation. So we have a purpose and we are enough. We are not only uniquely designed, but uniquely purposed to serve a unique audience. Purpose is in us, but it isn't for us. My father, the pastor, would often say the fact that we're alive is evidence that there is a purpose to our life. Our purpose has a presence, and our presence, has a purpose, and that purpose is the answer to problems that exist on the earth. Sowing your purpose as a seed in faith will allow you to reap the harvest that God has for you. Faith, after all, is the active pursuit of God's promises with unwavering trust. So purpose takes preparation, and wherever there's preparation, there's pruning. Because moving forward is attached to what you start doing, but it's also attached to what you stop doing. If you get your purpose wrong, you risk wasting your life. So for clarity and context, quickly, let me give some definitions. Purpose is God's invitation for our participation in the reason for our creation. A role is merely the responsibility that God might call us to from time to time. And an expression is the unique way in which we carry out that role. My mother, her purpose has been to encourage, inspire, and educate. And it's a purpose that's manifested itself in various roles and relationships over time, from principal, teacher, author, poet, and speaker. And if you know my mother, she has a unique savoir-faire with which she has carried out those roles. I'll tell you something else she taught me. She said, to fulfill God's purpose for your life, you have to relinquish your agenda. You see, control is merely an illusion. We don't have control. Control is reserved for God alone. What we have is responsibility, and our responsibility primarily is to discover who we're meant to be so we can uncover why we're meant to be. Who are the people we are meant to impact? Here's another life lesson. The highest form of compensation is fulfillment, not finances. And the highest form of fulfillment is purpose. So take that with you into all your relationships. Purpose requires prioritizing, and it works itself out in three ways: creation, connection, and contribution. You have to be focused on creating value, connecting with others, and then contributing that value to them. There are things that we are all put here to address or resolve. The fact that God asked you for something is proof positive that He put it in you. None of us are born and then chosen. We are born because we're already chosen. Even the fact that some of us may be agitated by a particular problem is evidence that perhaps that's the problem we're here to solve. It's what I call Godfidence. Operating in the belief that who God made me to be and what He gave to me is all that I need to do everything He told me to do. If we are purpose-led people, we become people who trust God. But you know what? More importantly, we become people God can trust. And there is nothing greater with which God can entrust us than the embodiment of the gospel. The gospel must be embodied before it's transferred. Something else I've learned, if we lack an understanding of or a commitment to purpose, we'll often distract ourselves with pleasure. And pleasure chasing, ladies and gentlemen, is the broad way that leads to decay, destruction, and death. Because we cannot build anything bigger than who we are. So we need to remain humble, teachable, and learn readily from instruction rather than experience. You see, wisdom can come by mistakes or by mentors, but mentorship brings wisdom without the pain of mistakes. Developing wisdom is usually incremental, so think of it like this. There are a couple of stages. The first stage is ignorance, the absence of truth. Then there's knowledge, the accumulation of truth, knowing what truth is. Stage 3 is understanding, the assimilation of truth, knowing what truth means. And then stage 4 is wisdom, the right application of truth, knowing how to put it into practice. There's another stage we should all avoid, and I call it the dropout stage. It's foolishness, the abandonment of truth. God doesn't reveal truth unless we move toward it. And wisdom, God's wisdom, will help us be the people who do the things that have the success God has already prepared for us. That is the simple formula for a meaningful and impactful life. Be, do, have. When God created Adam, he said it's not good for this man to be alone, and there's something distinctive about that. You see, Adam was walking in his purpose. He was rightly positioned to provide for, protect, and partner with a helpmeet, someone to help him deliver on his purpose. Adam was ready to network, and network effectively. You see, there's such a thing as purpose and vision compatibility, and I've learned it's foundational to how we network. It's not just about having company or sharing similar goals. It's about who can co-labor with us to achieve a God-given calling. If we want to get our life right, we have to get our calling and our relationships right. We're only able to do that through the presence, power, and principles of Christ. And when we speak of Christ's principles, I want to touch on just two. We have to be complete in Christ first, and we have to be people of integrity. You'll see some overlap in content and scriptural references to the previous presentation. If we are complete in Christ first, we don't enter into business or personal relationships needing attention, affection, or affirmation. Instead, we enter into those relationships with a clear view of how to create value, connect effectively, and contribute that value. We are driven by the desire to hear, "Well done," from the lips of our Lord. Now, when I say Lord, I think of Christ as the landlord, not a house guest. So we have to live every aspect of our lives on his terms. That frees us from this thing called entitlement. Entitlement is us being hyper-focused on what serves or benefits us. And nothing can kill a relationship like entitlement. When we talk about integrity, I think of it as the standard to which we hold ourselves and the value and respect we have for others. How we treat people is governed by our King and the principles of his kingdom. It isn't even dictated by their sins of commission or omission against us. One of the things I've experienced, even in the professional sense, is something called betrayal. And the betrayal is inevitable. Bitterness, though, is optional. And if you manage that betrayal with God, you're able to keep it from becoming unmanageable. More importantly, even if things don't work out for you relationally as you had anticipated, God will still work it out for you individually because you were obedient. If you think of Judas's betrayal of Christ. Jesus foreknew exactly how the story would end, but he didn't let that derail how he showed up in relationship to Judas. In fact, he used the entire scenario as a catalyst to his destiny. I remember Pastor Snell saying in one sermon, sometimes it's the flakiness of people that point us to the faithfulness of God. So we've unpacked the need to be whole in Christ and to be people of integrity. What that does is it allows us to build and maintain professional relationships rightly because it enables us to do four things. Firstly, we become what I call fruit inspectors. We are able not to judge a tree as being good or bad, but to look at the fruit of that tree and determine if it's best for us given the season we're in. Bible says bad company corrupts good character. Now, it didn't say bad people, because you don't have to be bad company for me. We can be unconsciously influenced by the misinformation that people bring, which then becomes misdirection, taking us away from God's best intentions for us. Secondly, it allows us to identify what I call cup-sized people. That's people who haven't gone through the sort of transformation that's required to make them ready for more. Even in a spiritual context, I remember Paul, as he entrusted the gospel to Timothy, telling him, be careful to teach only the faithful brothers, not wasting his efforts on those who didn't have real faith for God. So you have to be careful, even in your networking, where you put the best of your resources. Thirdly, you have to improve your relational intelligence. You define who needs to be on the bus of your life with you. You align where they sit on that bus. Not everybody needs to be in the passenger seat or right behind the driver, God knows. But you also refine how you manage them in that seat based on the season you're in. One of the things I'd encourage you to be mindful of is the difference between people's reality and their potential. In fact, their potential might never become their reality, especially if they're not prepared to do the work that's required. Lastly, we need to understand that not every assignment is assigned to us. As much as we may want to, there will always be people we can't help. There are 5 types of people we can't help. People who don't think they need it, which are usually the ones who need it the most. People who know they need it but don't want it. People who know they need it, want it, but they just don't want it yet. People who don't want it from us. I don't know if some of you have had friends that you may be giving advice to, religious or otherwise, for years, and they're just not taking it. And then some random person comes out of nowhere, gives them the same advice, and they're like, that makes an awful lot of sense. I think I'm going to run with that. And you're sitting there like, past 10 years of conversation, right? And lastly, there are people who just aren't willing to do what it takes to get what they say they want. I remember the rich young ruler. Sell all you have. Now, there will always be a cross section of those kind of people, even in your network. So, as you strive to deliver value, remember when you encounter them that you are not responsible for the pain that others go through because they didn't take your advice. I want to caution you, there is no such thing as a neutral relationship. It's either an asset or a liability. I'm not calling people out as being assets or liabilities. I'm just saying the relationship, right? It will move you forward or it will move you back. It will add or it will subtract. There's no such thing as a non-consequential relationship. I know many of us, even in my profession, who are convinced that some relationships, neither really here or there. It doesn't really matter. Again, that's not true. All relationships will nurture something good or something not so good in us. The imperfections of others, even our own imperfections, don't carry similar impact or outcome. They can impair our ability to carry out our assignment, or they can assassinate our assignment. Therefore, relationship management is life management. Those relationships tend to fit into three categories. They're confidants. Those are people who stand for you. They will work with you, walk with you through your challenges. They may pray and persevere with you because they don't envy you. They will keep your secrets safe, but they will call you on your folly because they believe in you becoming the best version of you. Iron sharpens iron, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Then their constituents. Those people who don't really stand for you, but they stand for what you stand for. Their interest is their agenda. So they may work with you in one moment, work against you in the next, because to them it's really about who gets them to where they want to be quickly and with less effort. The last bunch, probably the most populous, is comrades. They stand against what you stand against. They don't stand for you, and they don't stand for what you stand for. They make strange bedfellows. Think of them like scaffolding. Once the building is complete, they are gone with the wind. In their mind, you are just making up the numbers, standing in opposition to what they also oppose. And sometimes your only connection to them is a past that God is evolving you away from. If you try to take constituents and comrades and make confidence of them, you will end up disappointed, perhaps heartbroken, and certainly exposed. Time, ladies and gentlemen, is a far greater test of character than proximity. And I don't just mean time in terms of hours, I mean time in terms of nature and type of seasons. For example, some people are very good at playing the part really well for a really long time, especially when times are good. But one season of adversity will reveal who they really are and perhaps have always been. The Bible gives us a particular warning about those proud people. And the thing with pride is pride can make us unpredictable, untrustworthy, and therefore unusable, because as much as God can use people that aren't perfect, he can't use people that he can't trust. In networking, especially in a spiritual context, we're advised to make every effort to live peaceably with all men. Now, that doesn't mean the outcome will always be peaceable. We can't control what someone else does. In fact, people's trauma responses, tendencies might make peace virtually impossible. We are only responsible for our obedience, even if it doesn't render the outcome we think it should. How you treat people, I'm pausing for emphasis, determines your harvest. How they treat you determines theirs. So leave the results to God. You are not graced for everyone, nor is everyone graced for you. That's why relationships should never be forced. My father had this thing he would say to us growing up. He'd say, honor unlocks God's blessing that resides in others for us. So we need to manage every relationship with honor. Furthermore, some relationships carry what we call destiny weight. So we need to stay in the will of God, and we need to pray for discernment so we could understand which of those relationships carry that weight. Now, our discernment can never be sharp if our prayer life is dull. I want you to appreciate that some people you will encounter are simply rare. Rare. And if you fumble them, you probably won't recover them. You'll likely end up losing them. And sure, you may go looking for them somewhere else, but you'll soon realize that they aren't on the shelves for sale anyway. ESV says, great peace have they that live out thy principles, and they're unlikely to stumble. So my encouragement to you is that as you build relationships, build it with wisdom. You see, the enemy doesn't mind if we build the wrong type of relationships, build with the wrong type of materials, or build with the wrong type of people. Because he knows that when the rains fall and the winds blow and beat upon what we built, it will fail. So if we fail to utilize relational intelligence in this season, we'll regret it in the next. And the aim of the enemy is that we are unfruitful at best, or we die without having the impact we were made to have. We die full of potential that was never realized. Back in 2019, I had to have major surgery, and I spent maybe 4 or 5 months in the hospital recovering. During that period, I developed 5 pulmonary embolisms. And my doctor said, he wasn't much of a believer in God or a believer in miracles, but he couldn't understand why someone would almost die 5 times in such a short period and still be here. I got into a conversation with him about spiritual things, and we were discussing that we are gifted with 86,400 seconds every day. Our commitment is to not do the enemy's work for him, not invest those seconds into things or people that we are not purposed to. So we keep coming back to the need for purpose to underscore, underpin all of our networking. God designed us to be extraordinary people. Extraordinary people are really just ordinary people doing ordinary things, but in an extraordinary way. And that includes networking. Yes, we can network in an extraordinary way. So we've learned that we must be purpose led first, we must be whole, we must be operating with integrity, we must build and maintain relationships with honor, understanding where they fit. But now let me touch on just a few more points as I wrap up. In your relationships, you need to set boundaries. You need to develop the skill of coaching, and you need to lead effectively, starting by leading yourself. I know people hear boundaries and they get nervous, but the truth is, boundaries are meant to protect us for relationships. Your non negotiables may not be the same in every season, and so you need to revisit them and be intelligent about what you need. Boundary setting, in fact, is an interpersonal skill. And it's not a skill that's tied to your personality type. There are introverts and there are extroverts among us, but being an extrovert, for example, doesn't mean you'll be good for people, even though you enjoy being with them. Likewise, being an introvert doesn't mean you'll be more discerning of people, even if you're generally more thoughtful. So there are 4 types of boundaries that we could look at. The first is physical boundaries. You have to be intentional about how much access you give people to your personal space and how much physical access you give them. That is difficult if you come from the Caribbean. You have to have emotional boundaries, and by that I mean, what are the emotional investments you are willing to make? How much do you allow yourself to feel? And how much of that do you share, especially if it's with persons that you don't have a common future with? You have to have time boundaries. There are people that you're probably good being around, but you have to understand for how long. And you also have to have material boundaries. How much access do you give them to your personal belongings and even your finances? We also touched on coaching. Now, coaching is the collaborative process that's really geared to help individuals or teams achieve a particular set of goals. I'd usually engage in that by identifying the objectives, developing strategies, overcoming obstacles, usually through some sort of structured conversation or set of activities. One of the reasons coaching is so imperative, especially in networking, is that people generally progress and plateau. They would hit a proverbial wall. And so, if you understand their why, you're better able to help coach them through that wall. If you have I'll use myself as a reference. Again, laying in the hospital bed, um, being faced with life and death situations, I will tell you one particular night when the pain was so intense, I was praying to Jesus, but then I remembered, hey, Moses, Elisha, and I started trying to converse with them as well to see if they could put in a good word for me. Um, and God reminded me of my why. He said, you will live and not die because you have a work yet to complete. And that was my why, which got me through a year of therapy and a year of having to use blood thinners, etc., etc. The why. Something else I've also seen with some of the teams I've managed across the years. And in one instance, I had, I think it was probably about 300 odd sales team members in 14 different islands reporting to me. And I'd realized that those that performed the highest or the best were those where they rode in synchronicity. It wasn't a case of some people rowing and others just looking. It was also easier to resolve conflict between them when there was a general alignment in terms of what that resolution would look like. What I'd emphasize is that we want a mission to get to and maintain the best possible working relationship for all of us. A relationship where the answers weren't solely mine or solely theirs, it was a collaborative ours. Now, that didn't come without challenges and challenging individuals. But I had determined that I would let my relationship management be governed by what God said and not what I felt. And that is my admonition to you. You see, that is what true leadership is. Leadership is about inviting people on a journey to discover the best version of themselves while they follow you. Everyone may not have a leadership role, but we all will have leadership responsibility. And while authority can make people do things, leadership will make them want to do it. Authority might make people follow, leadership will make them want to follow. Leader is a noun, it's about who you become. Leading is an adjective, it's about what we do. We go back to the simple formula for a meaningful and impactful life: be, do, have. Everything rises and falls on the back of leadership. There's some key attributes that I think will help improve all of us as leaders. I'll touch on those briefly. And I can do it slowly so you can take copious notes. The first is, if you follow well, you will lead well. You see, you can't operate in an authority that you don't first submit to. I'm seeing my conference president here, and in all the years that I've known him, I have seen him serve, and sometimes under some less than agreeable persons. But he managed those relationships with honor, and now he is the leader. He submitted to authority, so now he can serve in it. I'm going to pick on him just a little bit more. Not many of you may know of all his academic qualifications, but one of the things he has exemplified to me is that the greater his education, the better his execution. Now, when I was doing my MBA at Andrews, I had a professor, Dr. Charles Tidwell, and he would say to us, if your education doesn't make you better at making better decisions, you've wasted your education. Third point, you lead from where you are and what you believe. It's about being authentic. Your moment will come whether you're ready for it or not. If you're ready, it will reveal you. If you're not, well, it will expose you. Point 4, communication determines how well people follow. Rightness matters, but the presentation of that rightness matters just as much. We have to develop the kind of eyes and ears that help us understand when something is a learning moment. You see, developing and growing take consistent effort. When you stop learning, you cannot lead. Because if your leadership optics are skewed or limited, you'll never make proper decisions. Here's a ticklish one for us in the church. Understanding your purpose and understanding the room will keep you from envying people you should be learning from. You see, it's not about wanting what God has for anyone else, but it's about wanting everything He has for you. Never go into an opportunity believing or behaving like you're entitled to it. As we mentioned earlier, entitlement will destroy relationships. And since you are your own responsibility, don't ever do average. It's less about certification and more about influence, skill, and passion. There are rooms some of you are having your names called in and you are completely unaware of it. And it has nothing to do with your certification, but how dedicated of an employee, co-worker, business person that you are. When that rises to the fore, I want you to appreciate something else, that popularity does not equal acceptance. Flattery has no place in leadership. Support is what's needed. Very often, the people who would flatter you with words, well, I'll leave that there. If you want to be promoted in any capacity, in any sense, be it in business or in relationships, be committed to your potential and its development. Development will always bring exposure. Lastly, remember that leadership demands a fight, and the hardest fights are often internal. So, before I get into the last few points, I just wanted us to recap. We understand that for us to network in an extraordinary way, we must be purpose led, we must be whole first, we must operate with integrity, we must build and maintain relationships with honor, understanding where they fit, we must set boundaries, we need to develop the skill of coaching, and you know, any skill development is easy today, especially with what I call the University of YouTube. And we need to lead effectively, starting with leading ourselves. Lastly, I think of networking as stewardship. And the most effective way to steward anything or anyone is through the indwelling of the Spirit of God. Leaning on our own understanding is only walking after the flesh, and that will take us down paths that are unproductive at best, immoral at worst. So the final takeaway is in terms of networking, and perhaps you'll exercise them over the next 2 days. Firstly, define your goals. Understand what it is you want to achieve through networking. Clear goals will guide all of your networking efforts. Next, you have to identify your key contacts. Who are the people you need to connect to actually meet your goals? Now, that could be industry leaders, potential mentors, or other individuals working in companies you're targeting for business. Leverage your existing connections. A warm introduction is way more effective than cold outreach. I would encourage you to prepare your pitch. In my days as a sales leader, we had to have what we called an elevator pitch. Something short and punchy that spoke to who you were, what you did, and what you were looking for. And if you couldn't get that concisely within 30 seconds or so, that it would take you for an elevator ride, you'd be out the door. It's good to attend relevant events such as this, conferences, seminars, where you will meet people who align to your goals, but be sure to follow up with them. For those of you who are a little bit more tech savvy, I would encourage you to engage on social media. I actually have persons doing that on my behalf because I suspect I'm just too old and tired for those things. But there could be platforms like LinkedIn that you use to connect with professionals. But if you're connecting, please share relevant content, participate in discussions, engage with the posts that others make to raise your visibility and your credibility. Offer value first. It's not about what you can get. It's about what you've been purposed by God to give and who you've been purposed to give it to. Follow up and maintain those relationships. Sometimes after meeting someone new, we'd be encouraged to send a personalized message, express appreciation for the conversation, and even suggest ways that you might continue the relationship. Networking, though, isn't just about making new contacts, it's about nurturing the contacts you already have. And most importantly, be genuine. Authenticity is the key to networking. If you build relationships based on genuine interest and mutual benefit, rather than transactional interactions, you will be successful. If you go back a couple of decades, and yes, I'm telling my age now, if you wanted to get the picture on your television set right, you had to adjust vertical antennas. This is the nature of relationships. If you want to get horizontal relationships right, you first have to adjust your vertical relationship. That allows you to see God, yourself, and others correctly. And you can't steward things correctly if you don't see them rightly. As my fellow presenter mentioned, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him, but let him ask in faith. So as you network, I want you to remember to do whatever God calls you to do, regardless of who it unites you to or separates you from. Do whatever God calls you to do and let him take care of the consequences. It's said that men seldom bridge the gulf between profession and practice, between saying and doing. My challenge to you is to dare to be different. Take up the mantle to be, to do, to have. Seek your purpose so that you might find it. And when you find it, secure it, protect it, run the race that's set before you with it, so that you are blessed to be a blessing, impacting those you are meant to be impactful to. When your purpose is calling, what do? You pick up the phone. And I thank you.